All right, we're going to go ahead and start the Human Service Community Safety Meeting for September 20th, 23 at 12 p.m. It's important to understand that no formal vote or decision about the city programs, policies, or budgets will be happening here. Our role is to explore various topics with staff, stakeholders, and community members, and to make recommendations to our city council colleagues. We want a process to be transparent, inclusive, and easy for you to be part of whenever you choose to be, and you can share your thoughts with us by filling out a comment card at any time on the meeting's agenda, about the meeting and the agenda, or reach out to us directly with your thoughts, questions, and ideas. We need you to fill out a comment card in advance that can be read into the record for any agendized item. The link to the comment cards can be found on our committee webpage at www.tempe.gov/HSCS. And you'll always will find contact information for committee members and staff there for non-agendized questions as well. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we have to approve some meeting minutes. So.
All right, I make a motion to approve the August 23rd, 2023 meeting minutes. Okay. Do you second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved.
The committee welcomes public comments according to Arizona open law. The committee may only discuss matters listed on the agenda. Matters brought up by the public under public appearance that are not listed on the agenda cannot be discussed by the committee. You have 30 minutes allotted to public comments, with up to 2 minutes per speaker. Speakers will be called in the order of comment cards received. Any comments not presented today will be entered into public record. Comment cards.
All right. Do we have any comment cards for this agendized items?
We have one comment card. It's attending virtually, but Sarah Kaplan, but I am not seeing her on the meeting at this time.
Okay. All right. So will you let us know if they pop up?
I will.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So committee session. So we're going to move to item 4.
Item 4. Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So item 4 is going to be lithium batteries. Tempe Fire is going to present, and I'm going to welcome Deputy Chief Tony Butch and Joe. Is Joe here?
No, it'll just be me today.
Okay.
We have another incident that Deputy Chief's handling right now.
Yeah, they just text us.
Good?
You're good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Councilmember Navarro, Councilmember Garland, and committee members. My name is Anthony Butch. I am the Assistant Fire Chief over Emergency Services for Tempe Fire Medical Rescue Department. And today I have the opportunity to go over with you a topic that you're seeing in the media quite a bit, and that's lithium-ion batteries. Mm-hmm. Lithium-ion batteries is not just a public safety topic. Lithium-ion batteries and the various uses affect multiple departments within our city. My presentation is primarily regarding the response and participation from the fire department towards the topic. So I kind of like to give that overview before I go too far in. But as we go over this, all council presentations and everything kind of focus on the council priorities. And like I said before, all city departments are working to ensure the actions and focus reflect the council priorities outlined here. For this topic, our priorities that we've identified are priorities 105, feeling safe in your neighborhoods. And our neighborhoods are different because some are houses, some are high rises, mid rises, businesses. All of them have lithium-ion batteries in some way, fashion, and form. So we want to make sure that they're feeling safe in those, and our response and our ability to educate them is provided efficiently. And then the other piece is on the customer service satisfaction. Because again, like I mentioned before, every department has some touch with this subject, whether it's through our development, our engineering, our transportation, our facilities, public works. We all have to come together on this issue. So with that being said, let me go over the discussion points that I'll provide today in kind of addressing. First, we'll do a lithium-ion overview. we'll talk about fire department incidents, safety measures, public education, and then also public and private partnerships to kind of give you just a very broad overview of this. So, lithium-ion batteries are playing an increasing role in every day of our life, whether it's iPhones, laptops, power tools, electric vehicles, and scooters, e-bikes. We're seeing it more and more in our city. And I think Tempe is one of those cities that we see a lot of these items at a far greater rate with ASU and the density that we're living and the type of community that we have with, e-bikes and scooters being used at a far greater rate than other cities. With the dynamics of our everyday changing city, we're seeing the use of these items even greater. According to Fortune Business Insight, the global lithium-ion battery market size is projected to grow from $36.9 billion back in 2020 to $193.7 billion in 2028, which is an unbelievable amount. The compound annual growth rate of that is over 23% each year that we're seeing. And that's just the beginning as we get new devices, equipment coming into the marketplace that are changing our daily lives. So when we do look at this, it's not just a vehicle, it's not just a scooter, but to put it into perspective right now, electric vehicles, which are fairly new in our society for us to deal with, kind of starting back to 2012, they already hold 16% of the market share of vehicles. So we're seeing this, but it did come up quickly on us. So with that, we have to figure out how to handle these situations. When you look at the lithium-ion batteries, we look at that they're susceptible to challenges. So batteries can overheat, they can catch fire, they cause, in extreme cases, they can cause explosions, and when they are off-gassing, the gases are toxic. So those are some of the areas that we have to look at. But how does this happen? How do we get to that point? We get through there through thermal runaway. So if you see on the graph here, you have our normal operations, and that's, anytime you see green, we're in a safe space. But here, if there is some type of abuse, then we will go and shift into that other area. And when I mean abuse, I mean overheating, crushing, penetrating, overcharging, internal shortage, external shortage, electric light leakage, those are the various things that could cause and lead us to an increase in heat. And when we have that heat generation, we go into what we call thermal runaway. And you'll see through there, it's increased heat rate, and then the temperature rises, and then that's when we truly have issues regarding, thermal runaway. And now we have a problem. Yes, ma'am.
I just asked a question. So the heat, you're talking about the temperature of the battery. Does that have anything to do with the temperature of the air? Like the heat from...
So there is, the best practice recommendation is trying to keep these things out of high temperatures. And obviously, if you think about your cell phone, if you leave it outside, we know in direct sun, if you're at the park, it's gonna shut down automatically. So they have fail safes in them to help protect that. But, heat, the temperature, ambient temperature is a direct correlation to it. The hotter it gets, the tougher the battery has to work to cool down.
Okay, thank you.
So as we kind of get just a broad overview on that, because like I said, we could spend hours up here going through every type of battery and where we find them. I think we're all aware of the basic areas. And I think the important thing to think about is to put this into perspective of where we are today regarding fire incidents in our city and statewide. So if you look on the slide here, you'll see in 2022, we had 3 incidents related to lithium-ion batteries. Currently, in this year, in calendar year 2023, we're at 6 incidents year to date. And those range from electric vehicles to scooters. It's just anything related to that where it's lithium ion identified as part of the incident.
And Tony, is that just City of Tempe or is that?
That's a great question. That is just the city of Tempe there. Now, I will say the next section down is the statewide incidents. And statewide, we have had 37 incidents year to date. Now, I'll say this with an asterisk because the information and the data that we have so far is new. The city of Phoenix, their Homeland Security Bureau division, has taken on, because of the state fire marshal's office doesn't have the capacity to do all the research and acquire the data. The city of Phoenix has taken on this responsibility since it is a regional, it's the regional partner for our automatic aid system. And so they capture all the data. And in a coming slide, you'll see that they have a QR code that every fire prevention area and every operational fire truck in the valley now has this code to be able to capture that data and be able to help us create our policies and directions that we're going to go in the future. So if you see the statewide incident, 37 incidents have occurred year to date. 28 of those were reported to involve structure involvement. So on the fire side of it, 66% were reported indoors, and 37% of those incidents were charging at the time of the incident, meaning they had it plugged in, and whether it was a device that maybe wasn't UL certified or one of the laboratories certified, saying, hey, this is an appropriate device, and it's the aftermarket items that you're buying that truly are causing some of this issue without that regulation.
So they are kind of pinpointing down specifics
Yep.
of why, what types, overcharging.
Yep.
I mean, I think those are one of the questions that people come up with, or power motors. I got a blower or a lawnmower, now it's electric.
Yep.
So I set it, leave it charged. Hopefully, I might leave, but does the device shut down? Is it, appropriate to leave in, not appropriate to leave in? Yeah. I think when we get good at understanding more information, I think those are probably bits of information we need to start broadcasting out.
Absolutely.
Right.
And a lot of it, right, is we are early into this, as crazy as that sounds, because there are not a lot. NFPA, UL, they're just now working through studies and reports and trying to identify the best practices and kind of the common causes for these incidents. So we're really at the incipient stage of this issue and topic, to be honest. And when we go back to the statewide incidents, year to date, 3 of the incidents were related or had injuries or fatalities linked to them. None of those were in Tempe. When we look at some of that data, I'll break it down even a little bit more for you. So the type of device that was powered during those things is a breakdown here where we had energy storage systems, electric vehicles, micromobility. As you can see, the micromobility are the greatest ones that we're seeing. Your cell phones, your power tools, scooters, those are the items that we're seeing quite a bit. Others, portable electronics, power tools, remote powered, you kind of see that the sheer number of them is minimal right now, but as we get better at reporting, these numbers are going to drastically increase. And then we look at our structure type. Again, this is statewide data. The single family homes were the primary, and you can see the multifamily and garage shed storage buildings were the second closest. And then the commercial, mobile home, and other were fairly low on that measure. But I think in our city, as we get more scooters, more laptops and devices, and we become more dense and start going up, we will see more of these, coming on the multifamily side as well. So I kind of talked about it already in regards to the city of Phoenix coming up with a data process for us to obtain information and then review it. And this is truly what we've done on all aspects of this. Because of the automatic aid system, with the 26 different cities that are partnering here, we're able to capture a lot of data and come to the table and say, okay, how are we handling what's the best practice to handle car fires, to handle personal mobility fires, to handle battery storage system fires. We have just completed as a region 3 new policies addressing all of this. And the policies provide us a standard operating procedure because at any given time, you could have any municipality fire department running through our city who's going to respond. And you should rest assured knowing that they all train the same way. We operate on the same policy. We know how to handle the situations the same way. So on this piece of it, that regional approach is really coming together. In addition to that, we are doing the regional approach with our R&D committees and equipment for operational needs. So we're in the process of looking at the equipment that we need to purchase, and that's not only within the department, but regionally, to be effective in handling electric vehicle fires, to handling small equipment fires, and so we have been doing that. One example is in fact yesterday, our R&D with Scottsdale Mesa, we probably had 15 different cities come to the Tempe Training Center where we did have demonstrations for a fire blanket, a way to suppress electric vehicle. And there is one tomorrow as well. So you're safe there. 2 different manufacturers, but again, we're just looking at the benefits and looking at a different way of handling these type of situations with the primary focus of obviously citizen safety, but we have to be mindful of our firefighters and what we can do to keep them safe as well as we're approaching something that's a different hazard that we're not quite used to. And part of that means making sure our gear and our equipment is deconned properly, and that we can clean it and make sure that our members moving forward are safe for a risk management aspect long term. So regionally, those are some of the things that we're looking at. Also, we've started talking because on electric vehicles, you've seen in the media that sometimes they are placed in the middle of a road or intersection, and we have to remove those, and to safely remove those requires heavy equipment and machinery. So we are talking about a regional approach there through going after some grant money to buy some of the heavy equipment needed, and still partnering with our public works and other divisions within every city to help solve some of these temporary issues. Because remember, as technology changes, these issues they're dynamic, they're gonna change. And so we have to be on that forefront of that. So earlier, as we're moving in, we talked about one thing that Councilman Navarro, you mentioned, was we need to educate and get it out there. So the next piece is what is our plan for public education? The public education plan has to be a partnership for our city, specifically with, the City of Tempe, PIO, the fire department, the police department, ASU, and then obviously our private partners, our public partners out there, whether it's the manufacturers or you name it, we need to all be on the same page. And it's simple messaging of proper storage, purchasing the use of devices that are listed by qualified testing laboratories, making sure that we're buying the right stuff and storing it the proper way and handling it. You'll see proper battery charging temperatures, and then proper battery disposal, working with our household waste department, ensuring that we're handling this better. And I think that's on our end of educating the public as a joint effort, not just through fire medical rescue, but through the city and our partners in itself. Now, when we look at that public-private partnership, there's a lot of different aspects that we need to bring together. And I kind of mentioned before as how it's affecting fire medical, PD, engineering, transportation, our municipality, utility departments with salvage, with waste, bulk waste, with household hazards. All of these things we need to partner up and have a standard relationship and a plan moving forward. And then the same thing that we've already been working on our private partners. We've been meeting with tow companies as a region to talk about best practices of removing these vehicles. Environmental cleaning companies, we are actively working with our procurement department to ensure that our environmental cleaning and hazardous disposal contracts are appropriate in addressing these issues. And then we're also working with the manufacturers, developers of community mid-rises, high-rises, of proper storage, how we need to set up rooms to help offset what I would call illegal charging areas in places, and educating the citizens in there how to charge their devices and equipment, and having proper areas to do it. And then obviously working with the schools like ASU and that. It's a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions and anything you may have.
Tony, thank you for so much for the presentation, Dory.
Yeah, thank you. I end up with a lot more questions. I'm trying to feed through them, but so one is, is there something do you know if there's anything in our city codes? I know you guys are just starting on this process, that our city codes say anything about storing, charging, anything about the batteries, at least for vehicles is what I'm specifically thinking about keeping them outside, safety, anything?
Off the top of my head, I would look. I don't see. I was looking
I would
for
guess
our
not, but I'm just
prevention.
curious.
I don't think that's the problem. Is they have not really come out, because the building code is going to get updated, I believe, in 24. So we just updated it on the 18 version. So a lot of these things aren't in there, and so it's not just Tempe. It's everywhere is
Right.
trying to catch up to the issues that we're facing.
I mean, I'm thinking we are putting solar panels on our house, and we're going to have a battery charging station to charge my EV car. And it makes me a little nervous when Joel was started to tell me about some of the fires and the dangers of that. So I appreciate that you're bringing this to our attention to talk about it, and that Joel brought this topic to us. And I like the regional approach with policy. I do, as you were speaking, I think it's a great idea to try to get this out to the public. If nothing else, we're being proactive. This is the Human Services and Community Safety Committee, and this is definitely a community safety issue. One thing I did not realize, and until you mentioned it, is that the fumes are toxic. Well, I saw that last night on the news story when they talked about the blanket. I watched the news, they were showing that last night. But, trying to do something that we can let the public know, and I'm just thinking of like a forum or something where we could publicize that there's going to be information and details and things like that, that we could get the information out to the community. But then would you guys be willing to work together, I mean, the departments, to come and meet people at the library or the History Museum? Because I think it's one thing if someone hands you a flyer and it says, okay, it's dangerous.
Yep.
But if you can actually go somewhere and then ask additional follow-up questions, I think would be really, really helpful for the community. So maybe that's something that we can work on. Not anything right away, but I think people need to know more information and know about this, because I didn't until Joel told me.
Yeah.
So
And I
thank you
think-
so much.
Absolutely. I think that is definitely a possibility. I think that we need more of the solidified data research and code guidance on some of this, because it's not new, but it came up very quickly on us.
Well, what I'm thinking of is specific, so when you have a fire in your house and it's with oil, you don't throw water on it.
Yeah.
So if you've got a lithium fire in your garage, or your scooter's on fire, throwing water on it's not going to help, and it's toxic, so get away. I mean, I don't think people realize that. So I think that's some of the stuff we could share that information now, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's a little scary, but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, Tony, thank you. Appreciate it. Once again, as Councilman Garland said, I mean, this was just a subject matter that I thought was important to bring up, and for all of us to get educated on. I think more to come down the road as we get better at this and learn some more information. I know you guys are going to be, and the region is going to be looking into this very hard. I know that our issue and every city issue is parking garages also, with battery operated cars. How do we manage that? How does the code change to that? What's the best policies of that? I mean, these are all questions that we definitely are trying to look into. And I will be at the blanket party tomorrow.
Great. Well, I can, tomorrow, I'll go over some equipment that we've identified. Interim Chief Duty and Deputy City Manager Dunsing have really partnered together and started looking at trying to find funds to address some of these issues. So I think I'll be able to give you some insight on some of that as well. And I've obviously shared it with Phoenix and other
Right.
regions. So we're trying to find what can help us solve some of these issues.
Right.
And I think the big piece of it is on the preventative side of education. So
And
that'll be key.
yeah, I think it's gonna be great tomorrow because I actually have been tasked by the airport to look into it to buy one, actually. Which gives me a question. Then I don't know if they can do this tomorrow in demonstration, but how does it work between two cars that are parked? Would be my question for later.
Yeah, you'll see it talked
Okay.
about tomorrow, and we could talk offline.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. We're going to go on to our next subject matter. We have Tim Birch to present on, or do you say it? No, I do. Sober living houses, sober living homes, and give us an update.
All right.
Tim, thanks.
Absolutely. So good afternoon, council members. Tim Birch, Director of Community Health and Human Services, here to talk to you today about our sober living fraud crisis that's present, and not just in Tempe, but the entire region and the state. Do want to start off, because so often we shorthand this around sober living, just to make sure that there are some good providers in the region, in our community. And when done right, these organizations that follow all the rules and regulations provide a valuable resource to individuals trying to recover from their mental health afflictions or their substance abuse addictions. So just want to kind of put that out there, but also make it known that the city of Tempe is, I believe, on the forefront of this conversations around these bad actors, and we are actively participating with all the state and federal authorities around pursuing these bad actors, including participating in some of the investigations that are happening. This issue did not spring up overnight, although it may feel like it just popped on some folks' radar. So put together a timeline based on many of the community conversations that we've been a part of, and again, thank you, Councilperson Navarro and Garland, for both being at the forefront of this conversation, including sitting in those monthly meetings with the departments and bringing folks to the table. We heard last week, State Senator Hatali talked about sitting with members of her tribe and having conversations as far back as 2019 around individuals disappearing from reservations or being taken advantage of or just being dumped in parks after being exited from these facilities, and begin to understand that there was a common thread here around sober living facilities that weren't operating in true fashion. We see that Access actually began to launch an investigation shortly later that year around irregular billing and around these practices. It was estimated at that time that it may have been in the tens of millions. 2020 Goodyear PD talks about standing up a kind of a one-man task force to look into two problem homes they were having back in 2020. As of last week, they reported to a group that there are over 150 in operation in their community over the last 3 years, how quickly this issue has multiplied. Arizona Department of Human Services issued licenses to one provider here in town that's been in several newspaper articles and media reports. I felt okay calling out that one particular provider in this site, again, just to show the issue has roots here in Tempe for at least over the last year. In fall of 2022, the city of Surprise, who shared their progress with us on numerous times, called together their stakeholders, all their city departments and community, to talk about the issue because they had upward of 65 homes operating in that small footprint of Surprise. They recognized that some of these home models aren't regulated from Department of Human Services, even if they're operating illegally. And that they had some issues, but they had one key tool they've used now to bring that down to under 15, and that is a business license, a blanket business license, and that is a tool that the city of Tempe does not possess at this current time. Rolling on into May of this year, Tempe Police Department was alerted by the Chief Medical Officer for Department of Human Services that there was activity at a local property, the Ramada. Again, as a part that has been linked to Newfound Hope. Again, the story, subject of several media stories and investigations. On the heels of that, actually right just about the next day, Governor Hobbs announced the Operation Rainbow Bridge group, where this issue specifically the misbilling and misrepresentation is germane to the Indian Health Plan part of access. And we'll talk a little bit about the billing fraud there in a bit. On the heels of being brought into that briefing, local governments have their own briefing. So thank you to Governor Hobbs' staff for taking the time to sit down with the cities and help us work our way through understanding this larger regional issue. Solari Incorporated was brought on board to provide a singular form of response to individuals impacted by this fraud. So I'll say it a couple of times for folks that are listening. If you, a loved one, or a neighbor you suspect is being taken advantage of as a part of the sober living fraud crisis, please just dial 211 from any landline or cell phone. Option 7, which is the missing and indigenous persons hotline number. But they are also working to record and track all instances of this. So well over 500 have been reported to them as a part of this. So it's 211 option 7 if you're in need of assistance. On the heels of that, Tempe initiated our Sober Living Task Force. We brought Solari in, and as well as the Attorney General's Office to give us a briefing as to the scope and nature of the problem. And we've continued to meet monthly as a part of that process. We just last week went and met with Senator Hadley as she hosted a multi-jurisdictional event at the State Senate building, and I think in echoing some of the comments that our leadership made at the Arizona League of Towns and Cities down in Tucson about a month ago around the need for larger interventions. So we're working on public communication. That'll be coming out this month as well. I know the council is issuing something in an upcoming meeting, and I'll leave that to play out. Future steps for us is we are working across multiple stacks inside this city. There is a targeted event readiness forum, which our emergency management, so thank you to Tempe Fire Medical Rescue and Deputy Chief Glass for helping pull this. This is a non-conventional approach to addressing a complex issue like this, but it brings us all to the table in a way that we can focus in on what are we currently able to do, what can't we do, and what are our recommendations and strategies to target something like this. So out of that, we hope that recommendations will be coming forth to council and leadership around things we need to do differently in order to track this issue and continue to be a part of that enforcement mechanism. So the scope of the problem. There are, as of last week, over 300 Medicaid vendors that are suspended and or terminated in relation to misbilling. Misbilling happens in several different ways. It can be individuals who have just gotten access to hold of someone's name and social security number and are billing and they're not even receiving treatment. We've seen that problem a lot with the homeless. It can be as far as bringing people as far away as New Mexico off their tribal land to a flop house in this valley and stowing them away and billing for upwards of 25 to 28 hours a day for services fraudulently on behalf of an individual. Over 168 providers, different providers, have been reported to 211 option 7, representative of over 500 different individuals. Over 5,000 victims have been identified. And this is where I think it's really important to understand the scope of the problem, that while the fraud is happening against the Indian Health Plan portion of access, it is not germane specifically to tribal individuals. That's where it started. But this fraud knows no bounds and has crept into all facets of our community and is preying upon our most vulnerable populations throughout the valley. 50% of the individuals that are caught up in this fraud have no tribal affiliation. Unfortunately, it also means they have no official remediation and supports because Solari and other folks are being paid to help the tribal nations and get people back to whence they came, support family, friends, and tribal nations. Individuals who are homeless were on the streets prior to being brought into these systems are dependent upon the existing homelessness infrastructure, which you all already know is well taxed and strained in our community. What was thought to be years ago just a few tens of millions of fraud, it was estimated to be over 650 million in the last fiscal year alone. A number was thrown out in Senator Hatley's forum last week that it could be, by the time this is all said and done, it could be over $2 billion in fraudulent billing. Which is why the AZ Attorney General's and FBI investigation is so important. Thank you again to Chief Kim McCoy and his team who are participating in the law enforcement components of those investigations. The only news we have on that front is that there was one very recent prosecution. I won't put too much out there lest it gives someone a roadmap to avoid it. The goals. The committee stood up in, I think, in very short order. Again, within a few days of finding out from the governor's office that there was an official road to helping address this issue. So the Sober Living Task Force convened around really three key areas. Communication, a coordinated response, and identifying our gaps and solutions. We've continued to meet around those approaches. And we've convened monthly. We have 4 working groups, our community partners. So thanks to also to Councilperson Hodge, who made sure that we had all of our school districts and our Title I coordinators there. They have identified for us over 8 different properties just in talking to the students on their campuses around where they're living and what types of services and supports they need. So that communication avenue is strong, and we're appreciative of that. We continue to meet with them monthly to give them a space outside the larger meeting to voice their concerns. Communications, presentations such as these, creating flyers and one-sheeters to give to nonprofits who will come in contact with these vulnerable populations but may not be aware of the issue, and how they, again, can help their clientele navigate properly through that are forthcoming. And again, I know that the council itself will be issuing some communication around that, around their viewpoint. Reporting and tracking. How do we identify, track, and report these issues when we don't have a mechanism in place already? And that's been a key piece of our conversation. Tempe PD, Tempe Fire Medical Rescue have been, and code enforcement have been critical in this conversation. And the goal of this is once we identify a mechanism for us to be able to identify nuisance properties, track them, do what enforcement we can do at a local level, as well as deconflicting that information up to the federal investigations. The goal is to spin that off into an ongoing way for multi-jurisdiction, multidisciplinary teams to staff these nuisance properties so we never lose sight of the issue, because the business models have changed on this as well. And so that is the shape of the problem. I'll go back. I gave you the scope of the problem. I didn't actually define the shape of the problem for folks who aren't familiar with the issue. There's several different models that plays out, and most likely typically associated with outpatient providers. So a registered, licensed outpatient provider will then work with a housing provider, either a neighborhood. So there are a lot of this happening in single-family homes where homes are being rented. This is what Surprise and a lot of other folks have seen a lot of. These providers come in, you'll see 10 different or so individuals in a home, and they're being vanned in and out of this community to treatment. So treatment's not happening at the home, so they're not violating the code that we have on the books that would prohibit that. But they are often being segregated, isolated, not providing access to full resources and travel abilities. So when you've got people who are only leaving a property for an hour a day and then lingering around, you often can get into some law enforcement engagements, which have spiked at some of these properties. Most particularly the ones that the format most common here in Tempe has not been the single family home. It's been the hotel motel model, which is the second big issue of that, where these outside treatment providers are master leasing or partnering with hotels and getting 100, 150 units at a time, blocks of space. And when you have 150 individuals with nothing to do all day, and they're not even being monitored to see if they're bringing drugs and alcohol on property, and in some cases, allegations are made that the provider themselves were providing drugs and alcohol to keep people complacent, problems do arise, and they have. So we've had frequent calls for fire medical rescue for overdoses. A lot of the property crimes and things that happen around those properties is well documented as well. And then the third model is licensed practitioners who are trying their best but just aren't following the rules and need some nudges to get back in line. So that's really kind of the shape of the problem, how it plays out. Our next steps is, again, to publish out some communication strategies so the community knows what this problem looks like, how to get engaged. I think we have robust communication strategies through 311 and council communicator. Folks are already contacting us. And then what do we do with that internally, since this issue cuts across multiple departments? So we're working on internal communication strategies as well. I mentioned the TURF, the Readiness Forum, will help us form some strategies and recommendations so that we have ongoing collaborative response as a spinoff of that. And Senator Hoddley has made it clear that she will be looking for partners to bring some bills in the next legislative session. And we, as representatives working on behalf of Tempe residents, will be there to make sure that voice is carried into those conversations as well. So again, I'll just close out with, if anyone listening fears their neighbor or loved one is being taken advantage of by a sober living home that is not providing the treatment they need, 211 option 7 is your first step. And Solari has done a great job of working with us in lockstep along the way to make sure we walk on individual cases as well as larger investigative protocol. So that concludes my presentation. Open for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Councilmember Garland.
Yeah. So if you are concerned about a loved one, you call 211 and press 7. What if you suspect something is in your community? Who do they reach out to?
Yeah, I would say because we can't be sure what's happening at a property you have concern around. If there's multiple 10 people coming in and out of a property, there's cars coming all hours of the day and night, I would say use our typical reporting protocol through code enforcement, 311, council communicator. If it's an emergency, please call the Tempe Police Department. And all those people I just mentioned are partners in this larger conversation to then track and trend what is actually happening at this nuisance property and what response mechanism needs to come into play. If it's sober living, then we will take it down that path. If it's something other, then the team is good at doing their job in that fashion as well.
Okay, so we want to say that, again, as you said at the very beginning, the disclosure, there are some sober living facilities that are good facilities that we have in our community. It's the ones that are not, and there's a movement for a long time with the missing and murdered Indigenous women, and now people are starting to look back and think, oh my goodness, that could have been one that we lost that was in a sober living facility and they didn't know. These are very dangerous facilities, the ones that are not legal, and that does make us concerned. Meeting with the senator, we did have those discussions. And regarding the billing, one of the billing that is being sent into the Native American Health Services where they can get up to $180,000, they said that's a low number, but $180,000 a year for one person that they list as Native American. They listed and found a 4-year-old child that is in a sober living facility that is for alcoholism.
Yeah.
So they're just using people who have census numbers, Native American census numbers. So it's really actually very frustrating. But it's good that all of our departments are working on this. I love the fact that everybody's coming together for these task force, especially Councilmember Hodge when she brought in the schools, because I think that's really important for us to track. There's people in these facilities that want to go home and they can't go home and they're not being let out. So I think this is really important what we're doing. I know we need to get the information out more to our community. Again, if you see something, say something. We've reached out to realtor agencies here in Tempe to say, because they're out there all the time. So anybody, if you see something, say something. It's the most important thing that we could be doing right now in our community. So thank you so much for coming out here and talking about this. We can't talk about it enough to get people to realize that this is just happening just right around the corner. And I just appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, Tim, thank you. I mean, that's great information. I think this has been on a lot of people's minds. Not to say that we're sober living or homes within our community are bad. No. We just need to make sure that we're monitoring them right. We're just making sure they're good neighbors, good partners, and they're doing appropriate business as they should. Those are well-needed things within any community, I would say. It's just that what has been highlighted is how do we start to navigate the bad players, and how do we start to make sure that we can, corral them and get those practices, out of our city and out of our state, so to speak. Yeah. So there's a lot more I can understand. There's a lot more work to come on this. When we talk about the 211, one question that came up was, I was thinking of is how are we doing? And this is probably maybe, another for the city itself, but how do we partner with 211? How is 211 doing? Because that's a national approach for mental health and well-being and everything that's associated with that. I think it's one of those things that, as each city, and this is probably my soapbox right now, but on a regional level, that needs to be broadcast a little bit more, but also how is it functioning within our state? I think that, I don't know if you have those answers, but I think that's something that we need to look into also.
Just generally, Councilman, when I mentioned someone comes to the attention of the folks at Solari via 211 option 7, they do initial intake. They're housing the individual for the first 24 hours of crisis to figure out who are you, where did you come from, how can we help you. If they determine they're not tribally affiliated, they can't help them through Operation Rainbow Ridge, they are notifying the Care and Hope line if they're a Tempe resident, and working with us to help them secure housing for those individuals. So the handoff thus far has been pretty clean in that situation.
That's really cool. That's good to hear. I mean, as I've gone through this stuff so many years, silos, and breaking down silos. Trying to get everyone to partner together. I think that's awesome. Just kind of see those things working through that. Yeah, I appreciate you also tapping into the resources that we have here at the city. I mean, literally through various things, fire, PD, public works. Those issues are spotted and found. I know that neighbors, just identifying, those homes and identifying, that we need something to be looked at. And I think that's probably more of that message that we need to get out to make sure that people know where to go and how to report and, how it can be looked at, appropriately.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate it. Thank you.
I just want to give a shout out. So we had heard stories about sober living facilities, and in my mind, everything else happens outside of Tempe. We don't have things like that happen here. But it was one of our security guards, Joseph Littlebowl, who ended up in a conversation with a gentleman who was looking for somebody off the Navajo reservation that was missing, and it was a BIA special agent who was here, and it was through Littlebowl that came in and said, this gentleman's here looking for this person, and he's also saying that there's sober living facilities in the city of Tempe. And my eyes got this big, and I said, really? Okay, well, I saw a news story on this. We need to do something about that. So we met with Rosa and you and some other people. But I just want to say, again, it's somebody who was working with the city of Tempe that was trying, keeping their ears open and trying to make us safe and continue, not only just the safe in the city buildings, but is looking out for our community. So I just want to make sure we gave a shout out to him, because it was really appreciated that he brought that information to us. And again, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, we are
Item B.
Item B. Yeah, we
right.
are actually adjourned, aren't we? Our next meeting, our next meeting is going to be October 18th from noon to 1, and we're adjourned.